Welcome, everyone, to our Salon number 66, Understanding and Dismantling Misogyny, with Darcia Narvaez and Genevieve Vaughan in the Maternal Gift Economy Breaking Through series, hosted by the International Feminists for the Gift Economy. We're really glad you're here today. It's quite a big topic. I'm Letecia Layson, your moderator. I'm going to give some short introductions and turn the mic over to Genevieve Vaughan, who will speak first, and then Darcia Narvaez. All right, let me introduce Genevieve, and then I'll introduce Darcia, and then turn the mic over to Jen. For those of you who don't know Genevieve, she is an independent researcher. Actually, the reason that most of us actually have come together here because we all know her. As a friend, an independent researcher who lives part-time in Italy and part-time in Texas. She created a multicultural all-activist foundation for women, a foundation for the Compassionate Society that ran from 1987 to 2005. She founded the Temple of Sekhmet in the Nevada desert in 1992 and continues through today. She co-created this network, the International Feminists for a Gift Economy, in 2001. We continue with discussions, works, these salons, and other gatherings. She has written several books. Her foundational book is Forgiving, a Feminist Criticism of Exchange in 1997. Her most recent book is The Gift in the Heart of Language. We're always very excited to hear Jen's new thoughts and her deep thoughts about the gift economy and how it relates today to misogyny. We welcome Darcia Narvaez. She is a professor emerita of psychology at the University of Notre Dame and a fellow of the American Psychological Association. She is also a fellow of the American Educational Research Association, the Association for Psychological Sciences, and the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Darcia has written several books herself. Her most recent book is The Evolved Nest. We're very excited to hear what The Evolved Nest has to do with misogyny and how it relates to the gift economy. One of her most recent endeavors is her blog that she started a couple of months ago called The Nested Pathway on Substack. So you can look her up on that. She's also done a couple of films, The Evolved Nest, Reimagining Humanity, and has a couple of websites. So take a look at our website, maternalgifteconomymovement.org, for more fuller and robust biographies. For now, let's turn the mic over to Jen and get us started. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for coming, especially Darcia. I'm so happy to see you. And Diane is going to put up my PowerPoint in a minute as soon as it's ready. And I just, when Darcia said that she would like to talk about misogyny, I thought I would bring up a lot of ideas that I've had over the years and haven't really put them together well enough. And so that's what you're going to hear from me today. I am sorry that it's only slides without any pictures. Because I have really just barely finished it. And so sorry for the incomplete stuff and everything. Anyway, hope it's intelligible. So will you change the slide, Diane? Looking at the confused, negative, and dangerous world situation, I believe we have not gone deep enough to understand what is wrong. When we do go deep enough, we find the problem is very simple, maybe too simple for our complex society to believe. That is because we have become used to the complicated explanations that we have given because we did not start at the beginning of the thread. Please change. Unfortunately, in order to arrive at a simple explanation, I have to be complicated too. But I hope it's not too complicated. So putting the maternal gift economy back into the analysis. Patriarchy and the monetized economy have dominated theory in the West for centuries, making theory itself misogynistic, leaving out the maternal gift economy and the women's perspective and discrediting them. I want to show that the existence of the prior and still concurrent gift paradigm, of which patriarchy and exchange are a variation, makes patriarchy and exchange derivative and limited, not originary and universal. Please change. To make a peaceful revolution, we have to restore the gift paradigm to our knowledge of ourselves. In fact, the origin for all humans is the maternal gift economy, and the origin is the key. It must be considered in order to understand its derivatives and developments, whatever they are. Unfortunately, the maternal gift has been discounted, and its place has been taken by those derivatives of it and its developments. In order to understand misogyny and try to dismantle it in our present society, I want to show how patriarchy and exchange have developed as variations on the maternal gifting and how they exploit it in an ongoing way. Finally, I want to show how the maternal gift economy and patriarchal capitalism are locked in a tragic parasitic embrace that also gives rise to, facilitates, and uses misogyny as a part of a widespread intersectional structure. Misogyny is the emotional and volitional face of the replacement of mothering by the abstract male identity. It is implemented by the replacement of giving gifts by giving harm. I want to propose a different kind of analysis of what is causing the disastrous world situation. I believe there are two main kinds of social abstractions. A gender abstraction that denies and replaces maternal gifting for the male identity, and an exchange abstraction that denies and replaces gifting in the market economy. These two abstractions from original gifting are merged, enacted together, and repeatedly replace gifting over and over in the daily practice of market exchange, buying, and selling. The male abstraction from maternal gifting and the market abstraction from the gift economy reinforce each other to the detriment of Mother Earth and all her children. Personal psychoeconomic processes in the West. Children are mostly born in nuclear families where they are usually cared for by mothers or other women. Young children have to be nurtured unilaterally by their motherers without an exchange. They are not able to give an equivalent in return. The motherer recognizes the child's needs and satisfies them. The child receives the satisfaction of her needs. This unilateral satisfaction of needs is what I call the maternal gift economy. It is free and it supplies goods to needs. It consists of a transitive gift interaction that can be repeated and varied in many ways, and it forms our basic human operating system. The maternal gift economy is the model from which the blueprint of our lives develops. This unilateral economy is the original phylogenetic, ontogenetic, and epigenetic human economy in which our capacities develop and our interactive and cognitive structures and strategies are laid down. I call gifting an economy because free is a way of getting goods to needs that is even more widespread and efficient than the market. I call it maternal because it is the necessary economy of mothering without which children die. It therefore presents a model that is common to all, beginning in the epigenetic period after birth, in which our genetic capacities are socially determined and expressed. Giving and receiving in early childhood. Just because maternal gifting is unilateral does not mean it is not relational or that it has no response. In fact, there is typically much turn-taking of responses and responses to responses, smiles and vocalizations on the part of both partners. There is also the baby's crying and the cessation of crying, her vocalizations, the mother's tension and relaxation, etc. A typical game between mothers and young children, called Serve and Return by Harvard infancy researchers, is credited with developing brain architecture through the stimulation and activation of neuron connections. Some meaning structures of the maternal gift. So 1, A gives to B and B receives from A. This creates a relation. Breastfeeding confirms a gift trajectory, grounding it at both ends. Each experiences the giving or the receiving of the other. This gives to both a repeated, concrete, internal and external experience of transitivity to and from the world around them. Giving and receiving beyond bodily contact creates a starting point and a path to goal trajectory outside of ourselves. Logic. If A gives to B and B gives to C, then A gives to C. There is a concrete experiential implication of value of the receiver to the giver and the giver to the receiver. Giving value. Directly giving to satisfy another's need gives value to him or her by implication. It shows that the other is intrinsically valuable to the giver. Children survive because they are precious and important to their mothers. Their mothers give them value and act accordingly. Children register this implication by valuing themselves, having self-esteem. The things that are used as gifts to the child also acquire a value, both as instrumental to satisfying a need and as a contribution to valuing the child. Children also learn about the world through the significance of the gifts they receive. I will give you a few examples to suggest how gifting functions and show how pervasive it is, so you can see the blueprint, even though it is hidden behind other words and concepts. An archaeologist from the future would see many permutations of gifting in our culture. In throwing and catching a ball, pouring tea into a cup that receives it, putting rice in a pot with water, giving fire to the bottom of the pot that receives it and giving heat to the water, and giving the cooked rice to the family to eat. Hammering to give the nail to the wall, giving the hook to the nail to give support to the picture. Then there are jigsaw puzzles and construction games like Lego, where the pieces fit together, one inside the other. One piece is given to the other. cogwheels in machines and watches, and you know how those work with one piece fitting into the next and the next and the next. And conduits of water, gas, and electricity that transport a content from a source to a user along a trajectory. Some more permutations of the gift that we don't recognize. We go from one place to another on a path to goal trajectory. In walking, we give one foot forward to be received by the earth and then the other. We give signs, sounds, and gestures to others who receive them. In talking, we give words and ideas to others who receive them. We put something on, give it to the surface of a table that receives it. We breathe in and out. The economic gift is hidden by naming it something specifically other. For example, asymmetric exchange, unwaged work as gift work, cheap labor, food, energy, raw materials, as Jason Moore says. So all of those are largely gifts. There's a large gift part of that. Low cost, the same thing. Housework is gift work. Surplus labor is the part of labor that is in excess of the salary that's given for it. And profit itself, I believe, is a gift of that surplus labor from the workers to the capitalists. Although perhaps the workers don't think of it that way, the capitalist receives it with pleasure. So we also have the male gender abstraction. For both boys and girls, the gift model is usually female because men don't usually do childcare. At a certain point in patriarchy, boys learn that they are in a radically different and opposite gender identity category from their gifting motherers. This is not the case in matriarchies. It is common for people in patriarchal capitalism to look at native economies and matriarchies as primitive. Instead, I would say that they were or are healthy, still not infected by the male gender abstraction and commodity exchange. Masculation. I invented this word a long time ago as the opposite of emasculation. So this means the becoming male. The division of labor in which women care for the children and men do not and are often absent creates a void of a model for the boy to know himself as different from the gifting mother. Nevertheless, the model of the father or some other male replaces the mother as the model for the boy's gender identity. I believe it is just this early replacement of one model for the other that is the basic logical glitch in our society. In fact, the male identity model, usually the father, is less known to the child, farther away, even abstract, while the boy is engaged in giving and receiving with his mother every day. Although they continue to be nurtured by their mothers, boys learn they have a different gender name and identity. They are not like the mother, but like a father, or anyway, a man or men who they often do not give and receive with, and differently from the mother, may not even see very often. The characteristics of male gender for little boys may seem strange if the father is often absent. If he and other male models are violent, giving and receiving are transformed into hitting, being hit and hitting back. In fact, this male model, which replaces the maternal gift model, is abstract or violent for the child. Yet he has to comply. Everyone defines him that way, even the mother. I believe it's not Freud's Oedipus complex or Lacan's nom or nom de père that is mainly the problem here, but a shift of category from an identity based on real life giving and receiving to a more abstract one based on the negation of the identity formed in the gifting mode and its replacement. Replacement replaces giving. Replacement or substitution is a self-validating, self-reflecting conceptual action in that as a general category, it can replace other specific categories of action. The little boy has to replace the human identity he has been forming with his mother through giving and receiving with a gender identity that he has not yet constructed with anyone. Forming this alternative identity is necessary because it is conceived of as always already there. It appears that the boy has no choice in the matter. He is forced to reform his self-concept, but the model he finds is abstract. And I believe it is the model of forced replacement itself. Power over is the replacement of others' will by one's own. The boy grows up with a gender model infused with the idea of taking over because his relation of identity with the mother has been replaced. Instead of giving and receiving, like the mother, one of the characteristics of the male model seems to be hitting, which has a trajectory from one person to another like the gift, but seeks to hurt and create power over the other, replacing the other's will with the hitter's own. The mother often supports the boy in his transition towards the male model, giving more to him than to her daughters. Perhaps she intuits the strangeness of this gender construction and wants to help him, or perhaps she is just caught in the sexism of society, which overvalues males. By giving more to the male not giver, she colludes with him and devalues her own gift model, which, however, continues to be the model for her infants and growing daughters. This results in women's role being that of serving men, both domestically and sexually. Men can then look down on women, seeming to be more adult than their motherers. So this is what I call the masculation abstraction. Replacement prevails while continuity of the life-sustaining gift mode necessarily continues because without it, people die and the community falls apart. The boy needs to feel his abstract identity is a gift given to him by his mother and father, perhaps, that gives gift value to him. The gift of not giving is counted as superior to the gift of giving and receiving. Replacement replaces giving and receiving as the most important general principle. The construction of self and community through gifting commonality is replaced by replacement itself as power over. Hierarchies are constituted this way, with each tier with fewer privileged members that replaces the ones below. Nevertheless, I insist that for the boy, as for the girl, and for the adult, the human blueprint is based on giving and receiving, though hidden and distorted and replaced by masculation and exchange. Misogyny. Just because the boy is forced to take on an identity that is based on replacing the mother-child giving and receiving, he needs to consider inferior what he has lost. He also practices his male identity by forcing his will on women, possible mothers, that is, replacing their will with his, thus affirming his more abstract identity as superior to theirs and implying his greater intrinsic value. He may hit women, giving them blows, to prove the superiority of his identity to theirs, and to force them to give preferentially to him, or even kill them to punish them for not doing so. The market, replacement and exchange. There is a logical shift in the market that is parallel to the boy's construction of male gender. If we do not recognize the maternal gift economy as prior to the market in every life, we cannot recognize this. Indeed, most economists take exchange as a given, and if they consider its origin, think of it as civilized progress, an advancement over so-called primitive gift economies. Instead, if we look at unilateral gifting as the original human relation creating and mind and body forming economic mode, we can see quid pro quo exchange as its deep, unnecessary contradiction. The exchange relation invades maternal giving and receiving interactive structures. As I mentioned, one of the most important interactions between mothers and young children is turn-taking, serve and return, which is the game important in the development of neuron connections. We might be tempted to think of this as an early form of the quid pro quo commodity exchange that permeates capitalism. Instead, we should see it as a turn-taking in free giving of initiatives to be received and responded to by the other. When children do begin to understand quid pro quo market exchange around 3 years of age, exchange logic finds the interactive gift structure ready to be invaded, like a radioactive isotope being absorbed into our bone structure due to the similarity between radium and calcium. The link between the two abstractions of economic exchange and masculine gender is repeated in market exchanges billions of times a day, and it creates patriarchal capitalism, capitalist patriarchy. There are two fundamental abstractions, the gender abstraction and the exchange abstraction, and they are linked together in the moment of commodity exchange for money. When the model of the gift is replaced by the model of replacement itself in the actual physical performance of replacement of one product for another. That is, the exchange replacement of money for commodity and the commodity for money. The consequences of the exchange abstraction for thinking. Alfred Sohn-Rethel was a Marxist philosopher who saw the exchange of commodities for money as an abstraction in real life that people are making without knowing it. This real abstraction makes people think abstractly. Exchanging money for commodities is an abstract process that is reflected in abstract thinking. Value, too, is a socially implied quality that does not exist materially. Sohn-Rethel says that the practice of this exchange abstraction in reality creates a specific conceptual abstraction, which did not exist before money was introduced in Lydia in 600 BC. He and more recently classics scholar Richard Seaford see pre-Socratic philosophy as deriving from monetized exchange. And Sohn-Rethel sees the later abstract thinking of Newton, Galileo, and Kant as deriving from the real abstraction as well. If this is true, and many people are now coming to be interested in what Sohn-Rethel has said and taking it very seriously and having conferences about it and so on. If this is true, we are being much more deeply influenced by our economic practice than we have imagined. If we are a maternal species, as I contend, we need to reclaim our thinking from the exchange abstraction and from the gender abstraction. not to their contrary in concreteness, but to an integrated consciousness based on giving and receiving. So I wanted to put that in because I think that idea of the exchange, abstraction, and thinking is an important thing. And now I'll go on to a bit of other things. Although they maintain their gifting, identity, and potential, women also take on work named by money, often assuming the double burden. In fact, the market itself has become necessary as the main or the only way to procure the means of unilateral giving for adults and children's survival. Independently of gender, the workers unwittingly give surplus labor as a gift to the capitalist, who replaces them as owner of their work and their products. Thus, replacement has become more important than giving, both in gender identity and in the market and in the home. Quid pro quo replaces interpersonal gift relations of community and solidarity. Exchange is adversarial and ego-oriented, with each exchanger trying to get the most possible from the transaction for herself. This creates communities of acquisitive and possessive individualism superimposed on gift communities and embedded in them, which are just the opposite of communities based on giving to needs. However, they coincide with the top-down relations of domination and replacement typical of patriarchy. While, as I said above, gifting gives value to the receiver by implication, exchange gives value to the objects exchanged, as made explicit in the general equivalent money, which replaces each and every commodity that is exchanged worldwide. Here, as in the construction of the male gender, replacement itself replaces gifting. Like the gender term for boys, money is the abstract masculator of commodities as their equivalent, moving them conceptually from gift to exchange and the replacement mode, denying gifting. Exchange is like masculation because it repeats in the market the gender-forming replacement abstraction from the giving and receiving mode. The exchange replacement of giving recapitulates the individual gender replacement of giving as the wider social level of the market and generalizes it to a common social principle. We consider the structures of power over that are generated by this deep structure of replacement as somehow independent of each other, but they coincide in an intersectional way. Intersectionality. I submit that the power over motivation, as it has developed in the patriarchal capitalist countries, of North over South, of racist whites over people of color, of nations over other nations, of colonialism, of the global market over local economies, of the oligarchy and deep state over the general population, of the masters of information over the understanding of the many, together with that of men over women, are all expressions of the replacement of the unilateral maternal gift by replacement exchange itself in the market and in misogynist masculation. So that is what I have to offer as the way we can understand what is happening in capitalism and patriarchy as women are discredited and the gift economy and the gifting way is exploited and parasitically dominated by exchange and masculation.
Thank you, Jen. That was great.
Thanks.
Shall I go ahead, Letecia?
Yes, please do. Jen, that was fabulous. Really fabulous.
Great.
And yes, before I just want to make a note and remind people that if you have questions or questions come up in your mind, please do put them in the Q&A and enter them into the chat. So we look forward to hearing what Darcia has to tell us now about misogyny and the dismantling of it. So welcome, Darcia.
Oh, thanks so much. Great to be with you all. These wonderful edge blockers, Maternal Gift Economy Salon attendees. That's you. That's me. So I'm going to share my screen here. Let's make sure I have it on the right spot. All right, so I'm going to talk about misogyny from the perspective of the evolved nest theory and practice. And you can find out more about the Evolved Nest at evolvednest.org in particular. And email me anytime with your questions or comments. All right, so we've had a long shift towards female oppression. So just like one slide on this. We've shifted over to unequal societies. That's where it began, according to at least the studies, the scholars who look at these things. The move from herding culture to herding culture from hunter-gatherer cultures. So let me just say, hunter-gatherer civilization is our heritage. We spent 2 million years there in our homonym line, Homo erectus and beyond, and even before that, but we don't count ourselves homonyms until Homo erectus. And in the hunter-gatherer civilization, it's egalitarian, it's matrifocal, it's, everyone gets their needs met. And I'll talk more about what that means later. So when in modern times, Nurit Bird-David, an anthropologist, documented how one of these societies moved from matrilinear to patrilinear orientation when they became a herding culture. They had been told over and over for years from government and non-government organizations that they should raise animals so they can get some cash, right? And so they hadn't done that. They treated all animals as persons, fellow persons in the community. And then when they started to herd them, to raise them for cash, they shifted to patrilineal orientation. That's probably because the men are the ones who are taking care of the animals more, they have more status, etc. So that's one of the reasons that inequality comes about. Another is the plow. Men are stronger, they can push the plow. Women cannot do that. So when agriculture moved in that direction, women lost their status. So, and then over time, for various reasons, which I'm not going to go into, patriarchy came about with particular institutions that foisted it on everyone. And then religious doctrines and justifications came about to explain female inferiority. And part of some of those explanations were misogynistic, that women are the devil's gateway, said Tertullian in the early years of the Christian patriarchs. Okay, so that's the historical shifts. How about today? Well, let me first give a definition of misogyny. These are common definitions. So dictionaries online will tell you it's hatred of, contempt for, or prejudice against women or girls. These can be institutional, and they can include the rejection of feminine qualities in males. Now, the Canadian Museum of Human Rights expands the definition to say it's hateful or controlling attitudes towards women, trans, and non-binary folks, especially as expressed in harmful prejudices, barriers, and behaviors. All right, why is everyone now talking about misogyny? Well, it's increasing today. In this book, Laura Bates, her book, Men Who Hate Women, she talks about the extremes of this misogyny today in the so-called manosphere, incels, involuntary celibates, and male separatists, like men going their own way, and Misogyny is part of most of every group on this plane. So, and other things too, white supremacy, male supremacy, and such. But misogyny is a critical aspect. Now, why is this an issue today? Well, this is one explanation that gender well-being has been shifting over the last 50 years or so, where women, females, girls are doing much better in all these areas. School readiness, so early childhood readiness for school, their scores on reading, the girls have always been ahead. But their math and science scores now are approaching those of men, of boys. Grade point averages are higher among females. They graduate more from high school, secondary education. They also attend college more, and they graduate more from college. There are higher numbers of women. And in general, they get more education, and they're also getting more and more employment. All these numbers are going down for men, boys, and men. So that's the status right now, the state of things in high income nations. Richard Reeves, in his book of Boys and Men, talks about how misogyny in the groups that I mentioned is coming from men's frustrations because of the data that I just mentioned briefly, that they're not doing well in life. And so it's women's fault, right? It's feminists' fault. But you know what? This is what the Evolved Nest says, misogyny masks a deeper problem, and it's related to the maternal gift economy. So, what happened? Well, patriarchy broke our communal evolved nest. This is the nest that humans evolved to raise their young as a community, as a village, and patriarchy broke this up, which I'll say a little bit more about in a moment. What is this original? What's our origin, I guess? And well, an evolved nest is what every animal has to raise their young for optimal health and well-being. And so they last to reproduction and create offspring that are going to be healthy into the multiple generations ahead. So it's not just about here and now, it's about future generations as well. It's a set of social and ecological circumstances that we inherit as a species. So it's one of many inheritances beyond genes. And most of these characteristics are over 75 million years old. As I mentioned, they're provisioned by a community. So it's not just mother and father, it's the community that provides these things. And I call it a form of love in action. So critical for early development, which I'll talk about shortly. And really, it's a baseline for raising human beings. It's all about gifting. It's all about giving unilaterally to the young, and then they become gifters as well, one to another within the community. It's a cultural commons for our human nature. And so caregivers are there to co-construct the emotions and cognitions of the child, how they think, how they feel, how they act, their sense of self, and their view of the world. Now, what happened with patriarchy? Well, patriarchy isolated women in households, which disrupted the evolved nest. It disrupted communal child raising. It disrupted the strength of our ancestry in female coalitions controlling male provisioning. And then we could say more about that, but it would take too long to explain. But this is what women did together as cooperating child raisers. They forced the men to bring the food, the meat that the very rapidly growing brains needed, and control with a sex strike and such. The radical anthropologists are the place to learn about this in some detail, and I can answer questions about it. So anyway, isolated women disrupts the evolved nest. And what happens when you isolate then the woman is she becomes a professional mother, right? She's kept in the home. And with professional motherhood, you develop an intense mother-child relationship instead of having a communal attachments. So not just mother and child, but child and father, child and grandmother, child and non-kin neighbor, and so on. This is our heritage to have that broad kind of attachment. So that's broken then. Here it's intense with mother only. And then in the last 50 years or so, especially, and yeah, there's nuance there, but so now we have mothers leaving the home to work, and they do so during pregnancy and shortly after birthing. In the States, there's no paid parental leave, so most mothers go back to work at 3 weeks after birth or 6 weeks after birth. And that is now disrupting the whole development of all children, putting all children at risk. Why is this so important? Okay, we've got a lot of data now about early toxic stress. We have to remember that there's a lot of growth that's happening before birth. And if the womb is too stressful, all sorts of things can go awry, especially the development of poor capacities for self-regulation or auto-regulation, and also difficulty in social interaction, dyadic interactive regulation with the mother. So if mom is stressed during birth, we know that the child is more likely to have a difficult temperament, it's called, which is misleading because temperament is not something you're genetically born with, it's something shaped by experience. So a difficult temperament means in those first few months, there's more crying, more fussing, and negative facial expressions and more things. And temperament, to understand it, at birth is a result of epigenetic mechanisms. Epigenetics means that genes that genes are a blueprint that you inherit from your parents, but they don't do anything until experience turns them on or off, to put it easily. So epigenetic mechanisms, a turning off and on of genes that are happening prenatally in the womb and are shaped after the womb, postnatally. And it's that postnatal social, emotional environment, not having your diaper changed and being fed only. It's having the face-to-face interactions of the giving, the unilateral giving of love, of learning to give it back, the back and forth of gifting. So what happens, or how, I guess I should say that the framework that the epigenetics then gives us is that genes plus early life experience, plus the hormones that are being released at certain points, which is also related to the experience happening. So if you're stressed as an infant or a fetus, hormonal expression or exposure will be disrupted as well. You'll be more traumatized and suffer injury, and learning and memory will be deeply affected as well. This is the epigenetic framework. And what do we know about this epigenetic framework now? We know that it determines risk and resilience to disease between the sexes. What does that mean? Well, it means that girls aren't as affected by all this because they have a lot more built-in resilience. They mature more quickly, so they're not exposed to the trauma as long, for example. Boys are less regulated, less resilient than girls. So what does that mean? Male babies need more support. Boys have greater difficulty regulating their affective states, their emotions. They have to rely more on maternal regulatory input or the caregiver's input than girls do. And they're more demanding as social partners because they don't know how to do it. They don't have it built in as much as girls do. They have more difficult time getting along with others, and they need more help of them because they're delayed by 2 years behind girls' development on average. So they need a lot of help from mothers to help them regulate their emotions. For example, Male newborn separation distress. One thing you do not want to do to a male baby. If they are exposed to separation distress, it's going to cause an acute release of cortisol and is a severe stressor. When cortisol is acutely released, that means high amounts of this hormone in the brain, it actually melts brain connections. It actually then is not going to allow for a growth state to grow brain connections, right? So it's a dual impact there. Repeated separation then is going to change how the prefrontal limbic, the two aspects of the brain that are developing at this time, changes in how they relate. They're going to be dysfunctional, and we can relate these dysfunctions to a variety of mental disorders later. So long term, there are impairments in behavioral flexibility, in emotion processing, and different aspects of executive control. That means planning, foresight, empathy, and these are all within certain brain areas that are scheduled to develop at that time. So even in daycare settings, male infants are more at risk. They can have a double stressor then if they've had a difficult gestation, and maybe birth and separation from mother. Then they go to child daycare. There's going to be even more challenges for boys. The large group sizes, excessive noise, multiple caregivers. We know these things are stressful. And then the brain then is not going to grow in the way it's supposed to grow and will become impaired over long term because sensitive periods come and go for particular brain regions. And you may not notice there's a problem until adolescence or adulthood when the individual becomes suicidal or aggressive or depressed or anxious. So one of the most important discoveries in all of science, these people say, is the enduring impact of early maternal care and the role of epigenetic modifications of the genome, the genes that you inherit, during critical periods in early brain development for health and disease. So early brain development is associated with health and disease later. And the early maternal care, of course, this is maternal because patriarchy pushed us into nuclear families, right? So they only look at mothers usually in the research, mothers and children, rather than the community. So this is where we know that the community also then would have a role in our traditional societies to modify the genetic expression of the child and to buffer what that child may have, any stress they may have had. That community of nesting will buffer that to prevent later ill health and disease. So in summary, this is all very quick. How do boys differ from girls in the early years? Well, they have less built-in resilience. They're slower to mature overall, especially those stress-regulating circuits. They're more vulnerable to social trauma, more vulnerable to endocrine disruptors. Didn't get to say too much. So toxins, that means plastics like BPA, bisphenol A plastic, which is the plastic from water bottles. When plastic is flexible, that's BPA usually, and it disrupts the baby's development in various ways, the hormones, but it also disrupts female maternal instincts. So those toxins really matter. We don't know enough about all of them. We know bits and pieces. And then because of all these things, when the boy is subject to trauma or just undercare, the lack of the nest, they have a greater likelihood of autism, early onset schizophrenia, attention deficit hyperactivity, antisocial behavior, addiction, reactivity, aggression, and violence. So they get stuck. They don't develop their fullest selves, and they get stuck in these self-protective mechanisms or these disorders that are indicative of brain underdevelopment or brain misdevelopment. So there's disrupted development overall in many systems, the stress response system, the immune system, endocrine systems, the neurotransmitters, how many you have, how well they function, the emotions and their systems, the joining of the two halves of the brain. The corpus callosum is thinner in neglected boys, for example. And so you jump into states, you flip into this state or that state, anger all of a sudden, right? That's a left brain dominant emotion. All the rest of them, the emotions are dominated or governed by the right hemisphere. So there's going to be gaps or lesions in various brain systems from early trauma, abuse, neglect, or undercare, which is the lack of the evolved nest. And maybe you don't know right away that there's a gap until later when the brain is still developing and there's nothing there for the next layer to build on. There's a gap, and then things kind of collapse. Psychologically, then, you're building in, with early toxic stress, you're building in distrust of self, others, the world. You learn to live against others instead of with them because they're living against you. If they leave you to cry, leave you to sleep alone, leave you in a playpen all day, and you're not learning all the social skills, the social and emotional intelligence, which comes after birth. Most of it, we're prepared at birth for deep sociality, for the gifting back and forth of the community. And when you don't have the experience, those things don't necessarily grow. It takes a lot of intervention later on to heal when you haven't had those experiences. So you become socially disagreeable, that difficult temperament gets carried forward into your life, and you're kind of oppositional. If you can be uppity and I'm dominant, I'm the one who counts more in this situation. Or if that other person is too scary and domineering, you withdraw or you just submit, right? So you get into, this is authoritarianism, right? You're seeding authoritarianism because that's what we're born with. We're born with the ability to be dominant or submissive. And so if you don't grow the good stuff after birth, or the very social emotional intelligence after birth, it's all good. You have no recourse. And so you distrust others, you grow up to distrust others, and you have anxiety and cynicism, you demonize others, blame others. We'll say a little more in a moment. So you're getting stuck in what we're born with, these survival systems. They're primate systems of domination, submission. That's not our species' normal way of being. But you can see here the chakras is another way to look at it. You get stuck in insecurity, that baby's been left alone and cried and no one was there, and numbness because it was just too painful. You had to shut down, and self-doubt. If you're a toddler and you keep getting spanked for, trying to learn, running around learning, all these things are going to seed self-oriented, self-centeredness, because you couldn't grow. You couldn't just follow that inner compass of being in the world with others as a fellow gift, a fellow gifter. So you're easily triggered into fear, panic, rage, or dissociation. And this is what I see in the United States across the country. We have a lot of people in this state. And how about male-female differences? What happens when you feel bad? Well, women tend to internalize. So when you feel bad, so let me just explain. That means, you're mentally not, feeling good about yourself, socially not feeling good about yourself, physiologically, maybe you have diabetes or something. Things aren't working well. You feel kind of sickly. Those kinds of feeling bad is what I'm talking about. Women tend to internalize. That means they blame the self. They turn that negative energy towards the self. Men, on the other hand, tend to externalize. They find something else to blame. And often it's women. And I think that's historically what we've done. Blame women for, why am I feeling, scared? You don't really recognize you're feeling scared, but you feel uncomfortable. Oh, it's them, right? Immigrants, the minorities, yes, those green people. And so that's then becomes, well, I'll say this in a second. So what we've done here is patriarchy has given us a trauma-inducing pathway, which I call the cycle of competitive detachment, where in early life, that means gestation and birth and post-birth and first few years of life, there's undercare. You're not provided with the evolved nest. Developmentally inappropriate child rearing, the community is not there, providing all the components of the nest, which I'll mention in a moment. And so you're planting layers of anxiety because anything frustrated becomes anxiety later. And so you, and now, if we think about boys and girls, both boys and girls are undercared for, but it's going to affect the boys more, right? And the boys then, because of the system created by undercared for boys, the patriarchy, they're going to keep it going. So they're going to be dysregulated in all sorts of ways. As I mentioned, dysregulation undergirds the vices that we see people have, the hypocrisy, because you might be told that you should be this way, this is the rule, but your body doesn't want to do that. Your gut is going in a different direction. What you want to do for yourself, and you don't necessarily follow the rules. And you become an adult that's kind of not all that well, not all that wise, and you have limited moral capacities. You get into us versus them, the dominator submission mode. And then those adults, being mostly guys, right, because in patriarchy, that's who's in charge, are going to create a culture that continues this cycle. They'll force adults, force women, mothers, into being distracted, overwhelmed, neglectful, or over-controlling because they don't have the time. We're always in a crisis mode. I got to get dinner on the table. I have to da-da-da-da. In the States, it's quite horrible. The worst place to raise children, I think, other than a war zone, because you cannot be nurturing. And so the cycle goes. This is our heritage, our wellness promoting heritage, the gifting all along the way through life, where you're nested with companionship care from conception on, all the way through life. It's a gifting economy. So you build a healthy psychosocial neurobiology, one that is cooperative, egalitarian. You know how to get along. You know how to be egalitarian. Someone who's undercared for doesn't know how to do it. And then when you become an adult, you are well and you show compassion and wisdom. It's not all about you. It's not about us against them, right? It's about us and us. And then you foster a community, keep the community going that attends to basic needs and respectful relations, because that's what you know. That's who you are deep down. Your neurobiology is that way. Your heart is in it. Your mind is in it. Everything to keep this cycle going. And in our ancestral context, this includes respect for our kin who are not human, the rest of the planet. So the most important childhood predictor of adult life satisfaction and well-being is the child's emotional health, followed by the child's conduct. The least powerful predictor is the child's intellectual development. What's happening in the global child-oriented world today? They're worried about children's literacy. They're worried about children's, language development. This is the wrong focus. This is, again, it's left brain. The Western world is governed by left hemisphere interests, which is about control, manipulation, logic, reasoning. The real part of being a human is the social emotional intelligence that's right hemisphere directed, and that guides your conduct. So we've undercared for our children and created the system that's killing us, essentially. So we need to return to societies that provide child well-being, like these images show. Nurturing of everyone. I'm pointing out, emphasizing boys, because we tend to under-nurture boys even more than we under-nurture girls. We tell boys, oh, man up. Boys don't cry. And we force them away. Now, if you were a mother who had a daughter first, and then you have a son, you wonder, what's wrong with this boy? He's so clingy. He's 2 years behind the girl. But we forget that, right? We have to then nurture them longer and more receptively, more sensitively. So the Evolved Nest is all about these things, the soothing perinatal experience, on-request breastfeeding. But then after birth is everything everyone else can do. Positive touch, lots of moving touch for babies, no negative touch. That messes the trajectory of development. Positive, welcoming climate. They feel like they belong, like they matter. A self-directed play. And that means not organized sports. It means being free to climb the trees and run around with others of different ages. We all need all these things throughout life, right? Allo mothers, other nurturers. We all need mentors. Responsive relationships. Those who are actually listening to us, hearing us, and supporting us. We all need nature, immersion, and connection. We co-evolved with nature. We need nature to feel well, to be members of the earth community. And we need healing practices because we kind of make mistakes once in a while and get out of sorts. Our mental health, physical health, our relational health can need mending practices. So these are the things, these are the components of the Evolved Nest that we've studied in my lab and write about. So please look us up. Lots of stuff here. You can click on things, you can QR code them, evolvenest.org, lots of things there, podcasts, essays, videos, tools to help yourself get nested, help you nest your child. We have a child care checklist for rating daycare centers, for example. I have a new blog, The Nested Pathway. And then these books are also on these matters. All right, thanks.
Thank you so much, Darcia. That was fabulous. I wanted to ask both of you, would it be okay if we actually put your slides up with the video so that people would be able to access them and go more slowly through them?
Right, we kind of sped along, didn't we?
Some of us are a little slower, Darcia, than others at grasping these large concepts.
Yeah.
Same thing with Jen. I was like, wait, what is that word? Okay.
That's fine.
Okay, beautiful. That I think that'll be great. All right. Well, thank you both so much. Jen, did you have any questions for Darcia that you wanted to ask before we actually opened up the floor?
No, I don't right now. I thought it was great. I'm always very happy when I can hear Darcia talk and read her work and stuff. Yeah.
Can I say one more thing? I didn't get everything in the PowerPoint, but I think, feminists generally say that, the career feminists in particular, that men just need to take care of the kids more. No, it's how. I mean, yes, we need men to care for children, young children more, but it's how you care for children. That's the Evolved Nest. And it's everybody. It's grandparents and neighbors, and everybody needs to step in. So it's not just dads, right? So I think we have to broaden our scope and get back to the baseline of our ancestry, which is communal child raising, and that gifting among everybody, not just the nuclear family. So
Yes. Yes. All right. Thank you, Darcia. I think that's really important. The difference between the individual or nuclear family and the collective or extended family. Yeah, I think that's very important. And it is systemic because our culture doesn't almost doesn't allow for that to happen, to a return, which means we must individually, unfortunately, or collectively, take a stand and just change the way we relate, which is not an easy thing to do, but there are many collective ways of doing that. Jen.
Yeah, it's not easy to do because we're all isolated in our individual houses and in our individual economies of each family. And it's competitive and not cooperative so often. So in a society where it's every man for himself, it's very hard to create community and an evolved nest. So we need both the social change, the social political change, as well as the individual care change. And I think in order to do that, we have to have a general change of mentality.
Yeah, so the sociologists and some anthropologists talk about three levels, right? There's the superstructures, that's the narratives, the stories you tell about your culture and what you believe in, kind of the worldview. Then there's the structures of what you allow to happen. And then the infrastructure, what you experience. So what the evolved nest is about the infrastructure for child development, needs to be this. But of course, the structures to allow it have to be changed, as you're saying, Jen. And then the stories about what is appropriate also have to change, right? So we have to change the story that, oh, humans are just naturally aggressive and self-centered, and that's the way it is, and you need a strong hand to punish them to keep them in line. No. That's all backwards. So yeah.
Right.
All right, let me check in with Liliana and see if she has a question that she'd like to pose for our panelists, and then I'll go to Judith. So Liliana.
Yes, this question, I think it was already answered, but maybe you guys want to give this person a quick explanation again. The question is from anonymous attendee. She's asking, how did patriarchy get started and how did it get a foothold?
Well, that's a debate, debated, I guess. Go ahead, Jen.
Well, I think it came up in many different places in many different ways when there were conditions that privileged men over women, or there was private property. A number of different ways it's happened, but I believe it has to do with this patriarchal structure of exchange and combining with the non-gifting gender expectation, let's say. But anyway, that's just my way of thinking.
And I would emphasize the undercare of men, boys, leads to these very dysregulated people, and then you gotta appease them somehow, and they all get together and they take up arms and they're stronger than the women, but they dominant submission is what they know, because that's the primitive parts of the brain that they're born with, and they get enhanced when you stress a child. That's what gets enhanced. They got to stay alive. They get mad when you don't come and get them, right? That's the rage system we're born with. And if that doesn't work, they have to, well, first they probably get afraid and panic. Those systems are also there. Then they rage. And if raging doesn't bring the parent in, then they're going to have to shut down, because you're going to die if you keep using up all your energy. And so then you go into dissociation, you just float out of your body and you're somewhere else in the stars, some people say, when they're abused as a child. So those systems then get enhanced. And that's what we see in young boys at 5 years old. What do they do when they play together? They're bossing each other around. And they don't know how to just, cooperate back and forth, because they're behind by 2 years on average, the girls, who are more socially oriented anyway. but then if you don't provide the nesting that the boys need to develop those social skills, which we see in some communities, some societies around the world, even more positive patriarchy societies have men who are, you know, flexible and attuned. But if you don't have that, you're going to have guys that are like we have in the States. We've got a lot of people who think they're better, but it's all self-protection. They don't feel safe. The only way to feel safe is to have your ideology number one, and you're going to make it happen.
Yeah, I think that question, Liliana, it's such a broad question, and it is debated over, and you know, it's a very, very deep question. How did it start and how did it take hold? And like Jen said, it was different in different phases. Colonialism is one of them, you know, but yeah, it's very, very difficult to say. None of them are good. Let's just no reason is good. None of it is good. Judith, let me check in with you and see if there is a question that you want to bring forward.
As part of that same discussion of the question of the origin of patriarchy, there was mention made of Claudia van Werelhof's The Failure of Modern Civilization and Maria Gimbutas's Kurgan hypothesis. And I wonder if you could speak to other possible resources that would, and you've both mentioned other writers in your talks, but if you could talk about other possible resources that bear on these questions.
Well, Claudia doesn't, I'm trying to remember who wrote The Creation of Patriarchy. It's a good book.
Oh, yes, I'll look it up.
Yeah, good idea.
I guess we can keep thinking about that. I see a question here about circumcision. Can I jump in? Yes,
Yes.
circumcision, infant circumcision, very bad idea that you put the child into a state of trauma, into distrust. I mean, it's extreme trauma, and it engraves the brain, in your body, right, forever after. So it's very, very hard. There are other ways to welcome boys into the community, but in the States, we have a lot of boys getting circumcised, not for religious reasons, but just because the doctors, it's in the medical field that the practice, and it's set up when they didn't think boys felt anything anyway, you know, and they make money from it. They sell it to pharmaceuticals, the makeup, people who make makeup.
Really?
Yeah.
So horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did want to mention just one thing, Darcia. I think that even many mothers are not aware that boys are 2 years behind in development.
Right. Nobody, virtually
Yeah.
nobody.
Yeah. So it's just it's a tragedy. I wish we could get an owner's manual for what it means to be human. You know, like a how to be human book. But that really struck me today, is that 2 years behind in development. I mean, not just emotional and social, but physiologically, they're behind in development. And yeah, that is a big deal.
I see
All right.
sorry, I see a comment here in the chat about then they blame women. Yeah, I meant to say that too. So I rushed through getting my PowerPoint together right beforehand, like Jen. But yes, so what happens is the men are blaming women, right? And boys are gonna, we all think we should have been mothered more, nurtured more, most of us, not everybody. But and then the patriarchy tells us it's mother's responsibility. And look, you know, and so we blame her for anything that goes wrong, right? That's Freud. So yes, for circumcision, mom didn't protect me.
Yeah. Liliana, did you have a question you wanted to bring forward?
Yeah, There's a question from Dylan Fairfax, and she said these two statements, misogyny is the emotional and volitional phase of the replacement of mothering by the abstract male identity, and it is implemented by the replacement of given gift by given harm. 1, are women infected by the abstracted male identity? And 2, what is the antidote? And then 3, is gift of harm still given? 4, sorry, there's so many questions here. Is this overlay of gift of harm over gift of love making it harder to see what is happening because they're both gifts? Hopefully you can respond to this.
Yeah, I maybe don't, I mean, it's a long question and I may have forgotten the first part. So I'm listening to the last part, but I think the gift of harm is a transitive imitation of the gift, but it is a distortion of it into a negative self-validating thing for the person who gives the harm, so that it is makes that person assert themselves over the other, and it's a beginning of an exchange, because once you like hit somebody, then they hit you back, and so there's this this idea of giving what you got, and it is one of the bases of patriarchal ways, and it turns up to be the same in wars. You know, as you're hitting the other, you're destroying instead of giving to the other, and then they do that back, and it ends up, you know, like Gaza. So it's a very a widespread and terrible thing that we have going now at this stage in our society, where we have tremendous problems as to the environment and tremendous problems as to the human environment, or the human internal environment also. So what the solution is to begin to revalue the gifting itself and the nurturing and the understanding of needs, rather than what we have in capitalism, which is really the egotistical exchange and self assertion and self valuing, and like Darcia said, that we need to have this community relations of a gifting community rather than an exchange community, which is not a community at all, really.
Jen, the first part of that question had to do with asking if women are infected by the male abstraction, the abstracted male identity, and what's the antidote?
Well, that as this abstract identity is the identity of exchange. It's combined with exchange, or the exchange abstraction and the gender abstraction together, and it's what's women can do that too. I mean, women are in the midst of the market and working in the market just like men are now, and so you can't even see that gender has anything to do with it hardly anymore. But maybe I guess I think even I won't go into it much, but I think the transgender thing is a kind of a response to seeing this equalization of gender in the exchange way, in the market, and in society generally. And I'm not sure really what the only thing we can do about it is to become conscious of what's happening and go the other direction. And it's so important to do. So that is, and even actually see the gifting way, which we haven't been doing. So
Let me just
Darcia.
say something from a psychological perspective. We all want to feel connected. And if you get, the only way to feel connected is when you get spanked, you're going to, learn that that's a way to connect. You feel like you're seen, right? At least they're hitting me instead of leaving me alone and not even attending to me at all, which is neglect, right? So neglect seems to have a more negative impact long term on people than abuse does, unless it's extreme. But yeah, so that it all gets twisted, right? Because we want to belong. We are social creatures and we need to feel like we matter. And if you hit me, I'm mattering, right?
All right. And I would just add that Darcia has a curriculum that is at her website, and she pointed out in her nested theory that the first two are really early childhood, but the rest of them, the other 7, you can actually redevelop and acquire that muscle as an adult. So that's available to you as an antidote to some of these challenges. So Judith.
Laura says, managing the trauma, induced outcomes of boys, men acting out violently seems like a high priority for this matriarchal shift to happen. We need to focus on the newborns of today if we're going to create a violence-free future generations. In my family, there is a newborn boy who's about 2 weeks old, and he has a sister who is 4.5. And both of you have spoken about this, but I wonder if you could say something specific about how that situation should be managed.
Having the newborn with the 4-year-old.
A newborn boy and a 4-year-old girl.
Well, it's good to have that many years apart because the girl won't feel competitive with the boy and probably will step in to take care of that baby. But the parents need to understand that the boy is going to mature more slowly and needs a lot more nurturing. So just step in when there's a signal from the baby that they're not comfortable, then get them comfortable so that they're growing in a positive direction all the time. Because if you leave them in distress too long, the cortisol starts to rise up in the brain, and that's going to interfere with brain development. So no sleep training until they're like 4. Sorry, but that's just fortunate that people seem like they feel like they have to do that.
well, I think that we need a general consciousness shift of the adults who then can understand what they can do, because it's a big social problem, not just the individual with the individual baby. It's the whole society itself that is in deep trouble. And even if we make life great for the individual baby, we still are this baby is still in a society where the environment is crashing and there's wars all around, and so that baby cannot actually be very happy in his or her life because of the general situation. And so both ends of the thing need to be worked on, the individual and the general.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, I think the problem is complex, but not necessarily complicated. It just means that there's lots of moving parts that need to be addressed at the same time, and I think that's Western society has us thinking very linearly to task one thing at a time, not that you're going to do multiple things at the same time, but you need to have multiple tasks happening where they can actually, the goal is to move forward in each of those parts a little bit at a time. That's the only way that you can actually get a whole system to change.
And we each have a role wherever we
Yeah.
are, whatever our gifts are, whatever our opportunities are, we can be part of the change, right? So some of us are taking care of young children. Others are working in politics maybe, or, government. You can do little nudges along the way. And if we do enough nudges, the whole thing can shift.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Let's see if Liliana has another question.
Yes, from Dylan Fairfax. And she says, when you, Darcia, said born with options for being dominant or submissive, I want clarity. Do we have other options?
I was pointing out that we're born innately with our survival systems, so to keep us alive. That's not enough, though. Humans, we're like fetuses of other animals for the first 2 years of life. So we're not done. We're not ready yet to be, fully human until at least those 2 years. And usually it's, 3 or 4, especially for boys. So to grow the fullness of our humanity, our full potential, most of that happens after birth. The reason we're born so immature is because, at least this is one of the explanations, is because otherwise our heads would get too big to come out of the birth canal, because we evolved from species that used to have wider pelvises. We narrowed our pelvis to walk on 2 legs. So that's why babies are born so immature. Today, doctors select a due date, and that's a guess, really, because babies change or vary by how long they want to stay in the womb by 55 days. So due dates are guesses, and a lot of children now are being pulled out of the womb before they're ready, before they're ripe. So we have a lot of prematurity in effect, at least according to the baby's development, and then that means they're even more vulnerable to stress, to being undercared for. So then those innate systems to keep you alive are going to be there, but they're going to be conditioned to be easily activated if you're stressed a lot when you're a baby. And when the stress response kicks in, the blood flow shifts away from your higher order thinking, and it mobilizes you for fight or flight. So if your brain is set up to be stress reactive or threat reactive, and you see threats everywhere, that means you're not going to think all that well. You're not going to be open-hearted and flexible because you're ready to fight or flight. So that's where our misunderstanding of humanity, that we're born this way. No, you're shaped this way in those first 3 or 4 years of life. I mean, you can inherit some epigenetic things too, but by and large, it's the nurturing that you receive in those first years that are going to determine, or at least set the pathway that maybe you can heal later if it doesn't go well in the beginning. It's going to set the pathway for your nature, your personality, the way you behave with others, and your health.
Thanks, Darcia. Jen, do you have anything that you might want to add to that?
Not right now. No, thank you.
Okay. Judith, do you have a question for us that you'd like to put forward?
I'm going to paraphrase a question from Patricia, who says you've been talking about maternal giving and good mothering, and whether there is comparable research about what good fathering means and what's the difference might be between good fathering for girls and boys. And I would add more than that, is there a difference between good fathering and good mothering, or are they all seen as part of the same activity?
Well, in the psychological research, they're assuming the nuclear family. And so they assume that the mother is the primary caregiver, and then that the father is sort of a subsidiary. So when they look at the, when they set up experiments or observe families, they're looking at what fathers do beyond what mothers are doing. So the nurturing part that we're talking about, the evolved nest, is kind of all there for all of us, and fathers and mothers. But what they've found in the studies is that fathers are particularly good at playing, and especially playing with boys. We have to remember that boys and girls are different innately. Boys tend to be a little more aggressive on average. They tend to be a little more oriented to objects instead of relationships, like girls are. So we don't want to expect boys to be just like girls, right? We should understand that boys are going to want to be moving around and jumping around more, that they're going to want to, play with objects in some fashion. And dads are really good at coming in there and playing wrestling, and all sorts of what we call rough and tumble play, which is really helpful for the boys' development, the young toddler boys. There's a book I recommend that's on rough house parenting. So it has a lot of pictures about how to, swing your toddler around in safe ways. And boys need that. And boys will then be able to learn to channel their aggressive urges into playful urges instead of being dysregulated and acting out in some way that's harmful.
Yeah, I think that if we had nurturing fathers, if men were doing a lot of caregiving and feeding and taking care of boy children in an intimate way, that would promote the gift economy for boys as well as for girls, and kind of alter the abstract male identity that boys are made to have because they don't know their fathers and they don't understand the difference, if there is one, between the male gender as, let's say, a gifting person and an exchange person. So
Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Darcia. Yeah, it seems to me that perhaps if we had just shifted the idea that, what are the needs of the child, male child and female child, who delivers the needs is not it's not gender oriented. The need of the child is the need of the child. So regardless of whether or not it's the mother or the father, what fulfills the need is fulfilled by
but it's
the
the male
person.
model, it's the model of the boy as different from
Right.
the
And
woman.
I'm saying for some of the needs though, Jen, for the development of what the child needs, would a father give it differently than the mother?
Depending, of basic needs, I don't think so.
Right. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's an exclusion of this exchange identity, and it's an assertion of a gift identity for both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you don't even have an exchange model in the beginning. You continue to have a gift model, which would be the same as the community model that early humans had, or even contemporary humans in community.
Thank you. Liliana, do you have another question?
Yes. From Susie Garfinkel. What can we really do to subvert all this in real time in our families? I tried so hard to do things differently, but at the end of the day, the dominant culture and the other adults had a much stronger impact on my now adult daughters. They all dismiss me as an unrealistic hippie, and the two who are now mothers are raising their sons in ways that makes me cringe.
Well, all right, you elders. What wise words might you have?
Hang in there. Your children, your grandchildren will come to you. If you're a nurturer, they will come to you. Hopefully you have time and space and places to be with them so that they learn to trust you. And it just takes one loving presence in a child's life to help them avoid risk-taking behavior later. At least that's what the research suggests. So you can be that person. And then forgive, right? Forgive your children for getting their way.
Yeah. Jen, you have anything to offer?
I think they could go to Darcia's website and go to her different podcasts and presentations.
Yeah, there's at my university website, I have a list of blog posts, most of which were at Psychology Today, that you can download, and they're sorted by parenting topics. So if there's some topic you can look at, like dangers of crying it out, sleep training, that was the most popular one with millions and millions of hits. So yeah, you could direct them to things, but be a supportive presence to your daughters still, right? I mean, you know that. You might give them the Evolve Nest book. It's an indirect way to influence people because it talks more about animal nests. It integrates neuroscience about our nest too.
Darcia, could you say a little bit more about crying it out? Because I think somebody else, I saw that. Could you say
Okay.
yeah.
So crying it out, sleep training is where you leave a baby alone to cry themselves to sleep. And that's a technique that's suggested by some so-called experts. They're not experts in child development because, as I said, those early stresses shape how the brain is going to function in multiple ways. And so to do that to a baby, you've now broken their sense of security, their sense of trust. Why should they trust you? I've had parents who email me. When I was getting on a plane, a father said, my wife is going back to work, just has gone back to work after 3 months being at home. And we were doing all the Evolved Nest things. And then we decided we should try sleep training. And so I followed the advice of putting the dryer on, the machine on, when I left my child alone so I wouldn't hear the crying. And he said, I couldn't take it. I'm now sitting here holding my baby against the dryer. I'm sitting against the dryer holding my baby. What do I do? Another mother emailed to say that she was told by a sleep clinic to sleep train her 6-week-old baby and leave the baby alone. In the morning, she went in the room and the baby was covered in vomit. It's a good thing the baby was still alive. But now the child is 13 and having severe problems getting along with peers. And she thinks it's the sleep training she did. And we have animal studies showing that just 1 hour away from mother as a newborn, as a sheep, as a horse, affects you in adolescence. You don't get along as well, right? So sleep training, there's different forms of sleep training. Cry it out sleep training is the extreme. And that's the one that does a lot of damage. But it's rationalized, by, oh, babies won't remember. Yes, they will. Their body will remember. They may not consciously remember. And you have to understand that the Nazis had sleep training manual or child raising manuals, and they recommended break that child's spirit before age 3. They won't remember what happened to them, but they'll be submissive ever after. They'll be a great little Nazi, right? In essence. And in the United States, we are conducting such experiments all over the place because people are ignorant of the effects.
Wow. Yes, that's very intense.
Sorry, I get on my soapbox for babies.
No, no, I understand. I just want to say, I remember as a small child that we were. I come from. I have four siblings, and we would get together with all of the families around us, and there'd be like 20 kids. But how we were raised was that if there was a crying child, one of us, not necessarily the mother, would get the child and hold the child. So there was always somebody caring for a crying child. A child never cried by themselves or felt like they couldn't actually have their mother. So anyways, just even the thought of it is scary to me. So I got lost in where I need to go. Is it Liliana or Judith? Because that was such a disturbing.
I know.
That's okay. Is it Judith? Do you have a question for us?
I'm collapsing several questions because we're running short of time, and they have to do with children that are subjected to patriarchal systems, and the three that were mentioned in various questions are the court system, the juvenile delinquency system, and the adoption system, and how to deal with those.
Darcia, do you have any thoughts? It's a lot.
Can you say it again? I was sorry. I got distracted by reading this terrible comment in the chat. Is this about adoption? Is that what you said?
Well, how to deal with I'm collapsing several questions, and one's about adoption, and one's about divorce, one's about juvenile delinquency, but basically children who get caught up in Western patriarchal systems that don't allow for a proper nurturing.
Yeah. Oh, it's horrible. I think we have to bring back our indigenous, Native American and other indigenous ways that it's not punishment that you deliver to someone who's gone off the rails or off the path and harmed or done something that harms the community. You bring them back in. You figure out what did the community not do properly to keep them connected and feeling safe and loved. And you figure that out. And you mend the community's ways and help the youngster, the child, get back on track. Now, these children who are forced into systems that are abusive in so many ways, and it's just heartbreaking. So we have to help them wherever we are. When we're on the street, when we're in the grocery store, wherever we are, we can be a force for love. We can be in the moment, try to be present with whoever we're with, and let a loving energy flow out of us. We are bodies of energy after all. So we want to learn to be open-hearted and fostering connected and enhancing the well-being of the other, and not brace against them. Because that's what we learn in patriarchy, is to brace against those other people. They're out to get you or get yours or whatever. You have to learn to let that go and go into the flow of loving connection. And so then whenever you meet someone who's in a hard place, they can at least feel a little bit of that love that the universe has for them. But they're in a place, a system that's keeping them from that feeling. So we, each of us, can do things wherever we are in every moment to be a force for loving, to try to help others change the system eventually. And I think I've said this before, but you know, testosterone is part of the issue here. It needs to be, you know, part of becoming a boy is having the hormone flowing at a certain times, and stress will interfere with that. But the other thing is, testosterone is related. If you have a high testosterone, you tend to have low empathy, right? And so the situation matters. So our heritage is to live with multiple ages and multiple genders all the time. You didn't separate out boys or men, which in men increases testosterone. So we need to invade the male boardrooms with babies. Because when you hold a baby, your empathy goes up and your testosterone goes down. So take happy babies everywhere, and let young children, they know things before age 6 or 7 when the cognitive shift happens. They're still connected to the cosmos. They still can say things honestly, and let them be ambassadors.
Wonderful. Jen, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think those punitive systems, or justice systems are based on exchange and on payment for what you did wrong. And so I think we should not actually have them at all. We should be able to phase them out eventually.
Thanks, Jen. I know we're short on time here, and I see that we still have lots of comments and questions that are starting to pop up. So I'm hoping that those of you who are in the room with us today, that you'll gather your thoughts and maybe gather some of us or gather each other and, you know, discuss more about what can be done and what you would like to see and how we can move forward in creating this new paradigm shift that's so needed. All of the comments and questions will be sent to both Jen and Darcia. They'll be able to look at them and hopefully and along with the registration email addresses, and perhaps if they have time and your question did not get answered, they may be able to be in touch. But you can always write to us at Maternal Gift Economy Movement at gmail.com. And we will make sure that your question gets to where it needs to be. And Darcia, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest another opportunity, and that is every month you can sign up through evolvednest.org for a discussion, an hour. We just gather people who are interested to come in and have a discussion. Usually it's focusing on our 3 movies, but we're thinking of having activist groups, starting that so people can come from there, whatever their walk of life is, and then we can figure out together how to deploy or activate a nesting orientation in that place of work or a life way. So look for that. You can sign up for the newsletter of Evolve Nest, and then you'll hear about it.
Wonderful. I just wanted to mention Heidi from Motherful is here, and there are 600 single mothers that they would love to have an evolved nest environment shaped around their, the mothering that they do. So I'm putting a plug in for that. So Jen, do you have anything else that you'd like to add here?
No, not really. Just that all this is really important because it's very much counter to the bad ways the world is going now. And so it gives hope.
Thank you so much, Jen. I loved your presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
Yes.
And I'd love to collaborate with anybody, and I'll be in Vancouver in the last week of June. If anybody's over in that area, be happy to meet up with you. Yeah, so motherful.org. Yep, love to collaborate with you. And Brown Bear Child, I think, was the
Yes.
somebody,
Yeah.
yeah. All right, thanks.
All right, everyone. I want to just thank Darcia and Jen for being with us today. Both of your presentations were just so dynamic and powerful, a lot of food for thought, and just really, kind of like cutting edge, like really breaking through this patriarchal lens here. I want to thank Diane for always our technical support behind the scenes and keeping us up and running. Liliana and Judith for chasing comments and questions. Your eyes are always helpful and appreciated. And on behalf of the International Feminists for the Gift Economy Network, I want to thank each of you who have joined us here today, and those of you who are viewing this recording for taking your time to be with us, because we do want our movements to go forward and to topple this thing we call patriarchy and the exchange economy. So if you'd like to be notified of our upcoming salons and events, sign up for our notification mailing list at our website, maternalgifteconomymovement.org. We do appreciate and we do read your comments, suggestions. You can send them to us at maternalgifteconomy@gmail.com. Please do join us in 2 weeks, June the 29th. I had July down here, but I really know it's still June. I was kind of skipping forward into the future. June the 29th for Salon number 67. Watch your email inbox for more information about that one as soon as it's available. And everyone, thank you so much. Darcia, Jen, do you have anything else you'd like to say before we actually say goodbye to our friends?
No, thank you. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Darcia, especially.
Well, thanks, Jen, for having me, and Letecia and Judith, Liliana, Diane, for all your supports, and everybody, hang in there. We are the transformation, right? So don't give up. Find your little way to sneak through the cracks like a dandelion in the sidewalk and show growth and beauty wherever you are.
Thank you, everyone. Have a really great weekend, and let's have some good play this weekend and world peace. Take good care. Bye, everyone.
Bye.